14th, 2023, regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. I don't think this applies to anyone in here, but if you're here for the assessing meeting, it is not in this room, it's down the hallway. So if you're here for the Planning Commission, you're welcome to stay. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission.
State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. My understanding is Ms. Dufresne will be joining us a little late.
Thank you. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt the meeting, please either switch it to the silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'll ask the Planning Commission Recording Secretary, Kathy Zarnecki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Buechner?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Here.
Ms. Parakis?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented this evening?
I'll move.
Mr. Faison moves it and Mr. Krent seconds it. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes from the February 28th meeting. Is there any corrections? Mr. Fox?
I would like to make a proposal to approve with an amendment.
Sure.
Under item 8, Planning Commission comment, I would like to have the following added. The Planning Commission discussed the possibility of having a joint meeting with City Council to discuss potential application and ordinance amendments as they relate to environmental sustainability. I don't know if we would need to add a note that says that no official motions were made, but just putting the discussion in there.
Any objections to including that in the minutes? Seeing none, so that's a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Is there a second to the motion? Ms. Malala Holly seconds it. Any discussion? We are ready for the roll call.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Now we're on to public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the Planning Commission for an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one rising, we will then go on to the agenda items. They were both 2 special use approvals, and I wanted to ask, and I believe the last time we discussed these proposals, we asked the petitioners if they had any problem with a presentation combining the 2 together for informational purposes, Planning Commission, and for Mr. Carlisle's presentation. Does the petitioner have any objection to combining the 2 together as far as discussion and questions? Why don't you come up to the lectern and let us know that for sure, and then that way it's in the record.
Good evening, Council. Jordan Jonah with AF Jonah Development. No, we do not. We have to discuss all of them.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Anyone on the commission object to combining the 2 together? Does the Assistant City Attorney have any problems with that?
I do not have a problem as long as the record reflects that any discussion for item number 6 is reflected in item number 5. I can speak with Ms. Zarnecki about how to make that happen.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Mr. Carlisle, you get to handle both of them now.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission, and to the public. The first item tonight for discussion is 2690 Crooks Road. Planning Commission should be familiar with this project as this has come before you in January. But a quick background. The proposed site is outlined in red. It's commonly referred to as the Lindsay Center. There is already an existing 4-story building on the site. The proposal is to construct a new residential building on the site in the rear of the existing building and convert the Lindsay Center into a residential use as well. So a little more detail here. The existing Lindsay Center is that kind of parallelogram, I think is the best way. Good geography there. Good geography lesson. Parallelogram. That's two parallels.
Geography or geometry?
Geometry. So the proposal is to convert the Lindsay Center into 62 units, and then behind it in that rectangle box is to construct a 4-story, 82-unit multifamily residential building as well. We do note that residential uses in the Big Beaver District that do not front on the public right-of-way are permitted via special use permit. The site plan is highlighted before you. Access will remain at one point off of Crooks with cross access to both the north and the east. We do note that in between the Lindsay Center and the new building is a row of shared parking, and we do note that the actual layout itself meets all the Big Beaver form-based bulk standards. The Planning Commission discussed this in great length at their January 10th meeting. At that meeting, there was discussion on building heights, green space deficiency, improved walkability for pedestrians, the issue of shared parking, and at that meeting, the Planning Commission postponed action to allow the applicant to address those items. Since that review by the Planning Commission, the applicant has made the following changes to the site plan. The first change is the new building outlined in blue there. They've actually removed a story. So it was 5 stories before, now it's 4 stories. In addition to doing that, they have converted the entire first floor to residential uses. They had a row of parking on the first floor. That interior parking or first floor parking has been removed from the building. By removing the 5th story, they've reduced the number of units on the site by 12, so the site total is now 144 units. In addition, they reconfigured interiorly to the site, to the building itself, added or converted into 41 studio or efficiency units. Before there were 0 efficiency units, so they've converted 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom into more efficiency 41 efficiency units. In addition, based on discussion and direction from the Planning Commission, they have increased the amount of landscaping internally to the site by 1.8%, and they did that by increasing the amount of islands within the parking lot itself. And then they also have revised the pedestrian connection site between this site and the northern site, which is the Kelly Services site. One point of major discussion of the Planning Commission was the issue of shared parking. They're proposing to do shared parking with the site we'll talk about next, which is the 911 and 999 Big Beaver site. And so that whole area in red is all being considered as part of a shared parking agreement. OHM has reviewed the shared parking, and there is a representative tonight, Ms. Hall from OHM, and she can address any questions with regards to parking and shared parking for these 2 developments. One of the major points of discussion I quickly highlighted was the issue of landscaping. The applicant was required to provide 28 parking lot internal trees. The previous submittal, I believe, only had 2 of the required 28 internally. They've increased that amount to 16 of the required 28, and there are 15 that are on the perimeter of the parking lot. So in total, they've actually exceeded the amount of parking lot trees, but they're not in the location of directly interior to the parking lot. This is a waiver the Planning Commission considers part of the site plan moving forward. With regards to architecture, the existing Lindsay Center building will remain. Again, it's metal panel with a lot of glass remain. They are putting a new metal wrap and balconies to the exterior. The skin is attempting to match the new building that's behind it. And again, most of the other elements of the current facade will remain. The new building that's behind it, the 4-story building, includes 2 floors of what they're deemed as utility brick of different gray colors, and the 3rd and 4th floor are hardy panel siding. Again, these elevations do show some details and variations of material, et cetera, and attempt to match the existing Lindsay Center building in the front. This is a rendering of the sites. On the left-hand side is the site, the part that fronts on Crooks. So that's the existing Lindsay Center kind of on the left-hand side, and then the 4-story building that's kind of in the rear of the site with a shared parking in between. Again, this also shows elements of the 911 and 999, which we'll talk about here in a second. So similar to the last review of the Planning Commission, there are a number of elements to discuss. This includes compliance with the Big Beaver standards, site plan review standards, the special use standards for the first floor residential uses, the architecture and material use, the parking lots, tree location, as well as the shared parking as part of 911. If the Planning Commission does recommend approval, we do so with the following conditions. They update the table of land use and zoning calculations on sheet C3. They address OHM's comments with regard to shared parking and circulation. They provide trash enclosure details that comply with their ordinance section 13.02. And lastly, they provide a shared parking agreement to the satisfaction of the city attorney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you want to include the presentation on the other parcel as well?
Start that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you and good evening. The next site, it's located just to the north of the site we just discussed, is 911 and 999 Big Beaver. Again, Planning Commission should be familiar with this site as it was discussed at the same meeting that we discussed the last site. The proposal here is the site outlined in yellow, and the proposal is to convert the existing Kelly Services building into a mixed-use site development. It includes two parcels, 911 and 999 Big Beaver, and they are both zoned form-based Big Beaver. So the background is all the red buildings are new buildings on site. It includes a 8,000 square foot commercial retail building that fronts directly on Big Beaver, a 14,000 square foot building that also fronts on Big Beaver, a new 552 space parking garage, kind of the interior of the site, a new building C, which is a small 4,200 office / community center that actually fronts adjacent to the new parking garage, a 3,200 square foot clubhouse that's going to serve all the retail uses on site, as well as a 5-story, 156 unit multifamily building kind of located in the rear or adjacent to the Crooks Road site we just discussed. In addition, they are proposing to demolish the existing 5-story site, 5-story building on site, and keep the existing, I believe it's a 10-story Kelly Service building, not 15, I apologize for that, but convert the existing Kelly Service building into, keep that as an office building moving forward. Planning Commission spent, again, a lot of time and discussion on this proposal as well. And again, there were some shared comments that were consistent with what the review of the 2600 Crooks site as well. This includes discussion on shared parking and parking deck, improve walkability for pedestrians, alternative site arrangement, access circulation, a drive-through for a financial institution and the viability of that, open space deficiencies with regards to the ordinance requirement for parking lot trees to break up the pavement and create more landscape islands, trash collection as well. And again, the Planning Commission postponed action on this discussion, this item as well. Since that postponement, the applicant has made the following changes. They've added parking lot islands by reducing a total of 13 total parking spaces on the site. By doing so, they've able to increase the amount of landscaping to a total of 15.5%, which is consistent with the Big Beaver district requirements. They reconfigured the parking between Crooks Road and Building E. If you remember, Building E is this building kind of down here. Parking has to be adjacent to the building. They had originally fronting Crooks. They flipped it, so now it fronts in the building. That's compliant with the zoning ordinance requirement. They've added some internal pedestrian crosswalks to the site, and one of the questions that came up was there sufficient stacking space for the proposed drive-through adjacent to Big Beaver? And they provide the stacking space and dimensions to note that those do meet the ordinance requirements with regards to those stacking spaces and dimension requirements. Again, both these sites, actually these three parcels are all part of a shared parking study and agreement. Again, Ms. Hall from OHM is here to discuss that if there's any particular questions with regards to shared parking. We do note that the applicant is seeking 2 waivers with regards to buildings itself. This isn't the form-based district that does require a build-to line requirement. We note that Building A, which is the proposed drive-through, is located 10.8 feet as opposed to the 10 feet required. So they're asking for a very minor deviation to that setback. In addition, Building C is seeking approval of a build-to-line requirement of 30 feet when 10 feet is required. The Planning Commission can grant those deviations. They're of the Planning Commission as part of the site plan review process. I do want to note, again, the applicant is proposing a drive-through for that Building A. It's going to be a financial institution, since financial institutions only require 4 stacking spaces. It is permitted through a special use process through the Big Beaver Form-Based District. There are 5 dimensional requirements that are required as part of a drive-through consideration. We do find that they meet those 5 dimensional requirements of the requirement for a drive-through. That doesn't mean there's not discussion on the special use itself, but those dimensional requirements have been met on the site plan. The other point of discussion is the first floor residential use of that 5-story residential building on site, the new one. The Planning Commission, remember, in the fall of 2021, there was a text amendment to allow first floor residential uses. This is done as a special use. However, it does state that those uses that front a main road, or the first floor that fronts a main road, cannot be a residential use. So the lines highlighted in red above you, the circles in red, those are frontages that can be approved through a special use. The frontages in yellow, which is still being proposed for residential, is non-compliant with the zoning ordinance. So you can't approve a residential use in the first floor in that yellow area. And so if the applicant moves forward, they would have to replace that with a non-residential use. In addition, the Planning Commission would consider those other sides highlighted in red. Those would have to be approved via special use. So I just want to note that there were no changes to the proposed first floor use that fronts on Crooks, and that's a continued violation of the zoning ordinance. The landscape plan is a little hard to read based on what they gave us, but they have increased the amount of internal landscaping. They're actually providing double the amount of required landscaping with regards to parking lot. We do note, though, that there are areas that are kind of devoid of interior parking lot, specifically at the corner of Crooks and Big Beaver. There's long rows of parking that have no breakup of interior parking lot landscaping. So they are compliant, and there's actually more landscaping than required with regards to parking lot. They're not in the locations approved. Again, this is a deviation the Planning Commission can grant as part of the site plan review process. For context, this just shows the site from a 3D perspective. The bottom part, bottom section, that's Big Beaver here. So these are the 2 commercial buildings being proposed with the access through the middle of them. The drive-through will be located behind this building. This is Crooks. This is existing Kelly Services building that would remain. This is the 5-story parking lot, and this is the new 5-story residential building. This shows the same site from just different perspective. This is Crooks. This is Big Beaver. Again, the 2 commercial buildings, existing Kelly Services, parking garage, and the new residential building. This is the existing Lindsay Center, and the new building, I don't believe, is shown, that's being proposed behind the Lindsay Center here. Similar to the last application, the Planning Commission has a lot to discuss. This includes the 2 building placement waivers, compliance with the Big Beaver design standards, compliance with site plan review standards, compliance with the special use standards, architecture and material use, parking lot location, and shared parking. Again, similar to our last report, if the Planning Commission does approve the preliminary site plan and the special uses, the following conditions should be placed. Review and revise the site plan based on OHM's comments. For Building E, which is that residential building, replace the first floor use that fronts on Crooks with a non-residential use along that frontage, provide transparency calculations, and then again, provide a shared parking agreement to the satisfaction of the city attorney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Yes, Ms. Parakis.
Yeah, I have a question about the Lindsay Center, which was the first presentation you gave. Did the first floor of the Lindsay Center that's fronting Crooks have residential, or did they have something else there?
Yeah, I'll go. So, well, Ms. Parakis, if you
Yep.
so we consider the front of Lindsay, so this is Crooks, the front of Lindsay Center is this elevation right here.
Yep.
So it's a much more narrow front. They've actually, at the floor plans they've given us, and it's in your packet, this is going to be what we call the common space, so it's going to be office, I believe the gym is there. There may be some shared meeting rooms, et cetera. So there are no residential uses along this frontage of the revised Lindsay Center floor plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Fox.
Do any of the 3D renderings give a better angle of the clubhouse that's going to be built on the east side of the site? I was just curious how that compared to the other buildings.
How do we go?
Do you want the
There-
2690?
I don't know if it's, no, because it would be in this one. You're talking about the 911, the clubhouse. Look, there are probably half dozen to 10 renderings given to us. I may have not chosen the one that showed it better, but in your packet, we can look and we can pull the packet up. There probably are renderings that show it better, but the ones I chose may not show it very well.
Ms. Malala.
Thank you, Chair. I have a clarification. On page 73, where Stonefield letter is presented to us in the packet, there is, and I'm going to read this, provide a shared parking agreement. This is a discussion that we had when this applicant was here before us, and we had talked about shared parking and a shared parking agreement. So the question 5 there was provide a shared parking agreement to the satisfaction of the city attorney. And I see that written there. It says the properties are owned and controlled by the same entity and should not require a shared parking agreement. For item number 5, I still feel, I think we still were talking about shared parking. And then for item number 6.2, there is a mention of shared parking. And in your summary too, Mr. Carlisle, we talked about shared parking. I just want to understand where we are at in terms of this. Is it still a discussion point for both of these?
Yeah, these properties may be owned by the same entity. They are owned by the same entity. However, they are parking for one site is being shared with another site. And so in our opinion, this is still shared parking.
Okay,
And so I can't speak for why the applicant feels that the shared parking agreement is not needed, but in our opinion, in consultation with the city attorney's office, we think a shared parking agreement is required for this development to move forward.
Correct. That's the confirmation that I wanted, that we are still discussing that, because when I read this, I was kind of confused, because everywhere else we are talking shared parking, but this one particular addresses there is no need or a requirement of that. So that was my one question. You may not know the answer to this question, which is perfectly fine too. It's 144 units they mentioned. Do you remember or do you know what the Lindsay Center apartments, the number of apartments in Lindsay Center is going to be? I know it was in our previous discussion, but I forget the
I
number.
believe it's remained at 62. I don't think that's changed.
That is 62, and this is now going to be 144, correct?
So 62, it's 62 in the Lindsay Center, still stays the same. Total is 144. Previously it was 156, so
Yeah.
I'll have to do the math about what the difference is. But they've reduced it, I believe, by 12 units by taking off the 5th story.
Correct.
And then again, they've internally kind of rearranged from 1 and 2 bedrooms into studio. But the total number of units has been reduced by 12.
Okay. My last question, sorry if I'm taking too much time here, but what is efficiency unit? I did not understand that. I'm familiar with what a studio concept of an apartment is. What's an efficiency unit?
From a zoning perspective, we don't differentiate between two. They're the same. From a zoning perspective, an efficiency in a studio is the exact same. It's a unit without any walls, essentially, that doesn't have a separate bedroom, defined bedroom. And so the reason why it's important from a zoning perspective is it only requires 1 parking space per studio or efficiency unit versus a 1 bedroom and above requires 2. And so you'll see applicants kind of change those numbers to get the parking requirement down.
I noticed that. Thank you.
Mr. Fox?
Ms. Parekas, then Mr. Fox.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask you if you were going to be looking at the pictures. Was there a picture showing, I feel like there hasn't yet been a picture showing the apartments behind the Lindsay, east of the Lindsay Center. Was there, if you're looking in your things, I thought maybe you could look for that too if there was one, because we didn't see one yet.
We'll look for it.
Sure, no problem.
All right, Mr. Fox?
I did find a rendering that shows the clubhouse. If you guys check your packet, it's page.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay.
The last rendering, go back to the last one. So, Mr. Fox, to your question, the clubhouse is right here.
There we go. Thank you.
Yep. So parking deck, clubhouse right here.
What about the question from Ms. Parakis about the other building on the site?
Looking in the packet.
Yeah, give me a second.
There is one on page 67.
Go to 60. 60 is
Oh,
page
yeah.
66
Yeah.
through
67.
69, 70 are in your packet. That's the renderings for the Lindsay Center site.
But not, there's no aerial of the whole complex like this showing that building in it.
You mean a three-dimensional rendered aerial?
Like
that?
this image, it's missing. And there's a couple of them like this coming from the other angle, and it's never, for some reason, that building's always missing. I just wondered why.
Go back to my other presentation.
Is that it on the top left? It was just on that picture?
Presentation.
One way.
9/11?
No, 6. Go to Crooks. Yeah, there. Our computer's a little, the screen doesn't catch up quite as fast as this computer, so.
I'm going to go to the,
It's not going up. Page 67.
Mr. Carlisle, are you able to answer any other questions while Mr. Sabaden is looking?
Yes, apologize.
Okay.
Little
Any other questions for Mr.
technical difficulties.
Carlisle? I guess while he's doing that, maybe this would be a good time for, is it Ms. Miller from OHM who's here?
we've got Lauren Hill from OHM, Sarah Merrill from OHM, and they're represent the city. They're the city's traffic consultant, and we have Julie Kroll from Fleiss and Vanderbrink, and I'm trying to figure this laptop out.
So we have the reps from OHM come up to answer some of the questions. I know that especially some of the shared parking issues. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Hull, and I'm a traffic engineer at OHM Advisors.
Could you give us a kind of a overview? I know it's in our packet, but kind of an overview of the concerns for both sites and how they work together, especially the shared parking and some of the concerns about pedestrian access?
Yes, so OHM recommends there being a shared parking agreement between both sites. They are currently owned by the same entity. However, if one of them is sold at a later date and there's not a shared parking agreement, that can lead to issues and a deficit in parking, which would not be a good thing. So that's why we're recommending a shared parking agreement at this time. For connectivity, we just want to make sure that when construction's going on between both sites, that it's pedestrian friendly, since there are shared parking. So you're going to have people that need to be able to walk between both sites, no matter what stage of construction is happening.
Any other questions? Good. Ms. Parakis.
Yeah, I would like to know your thoughts on the shared parking agreement in terms of the residents of the Lindsay apartment and the one to the east of it, because it's underparked on the property itself. So when you look to the abutting property, there's another residential building where they're going to be parking. So is it correct for me to envision that if there is overflow parking, that the people on the Lindsay Center property are going to be walking all the way to the parking garage for parking?
Yes, that is correct. So in general, there is a 300-foot range that pedestrians are supposed to be allowed to walk for a shared parking agreement. However, we deferred to the city, and I believe at the last meeting it was discussed that 300-foot would be wavered. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, that was not,
Well, I
don't
think
remember that.
the ordinance, and I don't have it in front of me, I could grab it. But the ordinance specifically mentions when the parking is on a different property, that there's a distance requirement, but the applicant's making the argument that that it's one site owned by one owner, so that wouldn't apply.
Any other questions? Go, yes, Mr. Fox.
Yeah, so I was just curious about specifically pedestrian crossing on Crooks and Big Beaver. I noticed that there's a lot of commercial across the street there on Crooks. I was curious if OHM's analysis happened to look into if we're suddenly introducing a lot of potential pedestrians to the area, if there would need to be improvements to Crooks Road and the ability to cross Crooks at potentially different sites other than the main intersection there.
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. OHM particularly focused on pedestrian circulation within the site.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Tagle.
How many parking spaces deficient are they on the south property?
That is a good question. I believe it used to be 80 spaces.
Deficient,
Correct.
okay. And does that reduce by 12 by lower? If that was when they had the 5-story version, or was that currently?
That's what it used to be. I do not know the current number.
So 80 deficient, if I understand what you're saying, those people parking there would have to walk to the parking structure to get access to their cars?
Correct. Comments?
Here comes another person from OHM.
Sarah Merrill, OHM Traffic Engineer. Based on the revised site plan with the reduced number of units in that south building, the ordinance requirements without shared parking, the south site would be deficient 51 spaces. With shared parking, they are not deficient, but they do have to utilize the site to the north.
And when you say site to the north, you mean the parking deck?
Yeah, the 999 site.
But I mean, no surface parking, the parking deck, is that where the 51 deficient spaces are going to be counted?
To my understanding, they are not assigned, so the surface spaces, for example, to the east of that 5-story, I believe it's 5-story, Building E, those surface spaces would be available for anybody to use. The parking spaces to the west of that building, those are surface spaces, those would be available, kind of first come, first serve.
How many spaces for the, let's call it the U-shaped building, there are surface parking for that or around that building? How many are required for that building, and how many of those will have to use the parking deck?
The 999, 911 site, the parking for that was looked at as the entire site. So it wasn't broken out for individual buildings, for the bank individually or for the residential.
Well, I'm speaking just the residential buildings right now. There's a number for each residential building, required number of parking. I guess what I'm getting at is how many people in total are going to have to use the deck to pick up the difference of not enough surface parking around the buildings?
A substantial number. I can't read from here what the number of dwelling units is in there.
I can't either.
But as a 1 or 2 bedroom, it would be expected that each unit would have 2 parking spaces. The number utilized is typically less than that, at 2 parking spaces per bedroom or per dwelling unit is on the conservative side. But in that ballpark, between 1.5 and 2 spaces is what we expect would be utilized.
And in your professional opinion, the distance, whether it's a single ownership property or not, the distance from the buildings that are in the southernmost portion of the property to the parking deck, is that a reasonable walking distance?
Depends a lot on the community, on the development, on the age of tenants. Having been in Ann Arbor and Birmingham, depending on the area, people are willing to walk several blocks to get to a parking spot. In other areas, that's not acceptable. So I can't make that call for the
just
tenants
asking for an
in this
opinion.
particular site.
Yeah, just asking for your opinion. You deal with this more than we do.
I can say I personally would walk that without thinking twice,
Okay.
but if it's a rainy day, I might be circling the parking lot a couple times, hoping a spot opens up before I walk it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the reps from OHM? Thank you very much. We might ask you again for more questions. And I think, Mr. Savinet, you found that map that Ms. Parakis was asking about?
I wasn't able to, Sean was able to, my computer keeps switching settings. I think was it a rendering you were looking for?
Like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Go up. Go up.
I thought you had mentioned receiving a couple images that included it, that's why I was asking.
Okay. So I received this late this afternoon from the engineer, and it's representation with some color that captures the entire site. And then, I wasn't planning on presenting this. This is for Eric if he wants to. So this is this entire site. And then this shows pedestrian pathways on the site, and then this shows amenities on the site. Mr. Williams asked me to have this on the laptop, but I thought it was helpful for the purposes of talking about the entire site. This is a very helpful drawing.
So one more question, since we have this image up. And maybe it's a question for the applicant, but if you know, what kind of access do they share with, I think this is Town Center Drive, this drive that goes out to Big Beaver. I know that I drove the property, so I know that there is cross-access, but is it permitted? Is it open for the residents to leave that way?
I would probably defer to one of the traffic experts for that question,
Oh, okay.
either the petitioner's expert or one of ours.
Any more questions for Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savinet? If not, then we'll bring up Mr. Jonah. Come on up, and you might be able to answer some of the questions, and if you want to go through your entire presentation, feel free.
Yes, of course. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for having us tonight. My name is Jordan Jonah, as I mentioned earlier. I'm also here with Eric Williams from Stonefield, Kevin Biddison from Biddison Architecture, Julie Grove from Traffic Engineering, and Austin Armstrong from our office. I just want to walk you through the whole project and give you a whole detail and clear up as many issues or contention points that we can and discuss more and further with you. Starting from Lindsay Center, which is 2690 Crooks. First, I do want to clear the air. It was a miscommunication on our part. There will be a cross-access agreement with the properties. That was just a miscommunication. We would submit that with approval with the city, as we always do. After approval, we do go through those steps, and that was just a miscommunication on our part. There will be a cross-access agreement. They are not the same entities that are own these properties. They are two different entities, so there will be and we would need that on our part too. It was just like a miscommunication. So changes from last time, we did go back and we took all of the points to heart, and we saw how we could better this whole development. We did lower the number of units on Lindsay Center, and we did add a lot of trees and broke it up as best as possible. We did put some in the parking lot, which was a contention point, but also we want trees around the property too. It is a residential property. We want people to feel comfortable living there, even on the first floor. And you do have an office building, another apartment building, and we felt best that there should be a lot of shrubbery around the outside of the property. We also added a good amount of trees within the parking lot. We feel it breaks it up without losing so much of the parking on the property. And in order to make this project work, we looked at different units on the site. We looked at changing some of the one-bedrooms into studios and helping the parking out. We did, in our minds, really reduce the number of overall parking for the Lindsay Center. And our idea, and I believe there is a parking plan that was presented in the blast package, that got a laser today. The Lindsay Center here would be able to take these parking spaces. The bigger building here would utilize the parking structure, and there also is first floor parking underneath the building. Excuse me. But just to walk through the property more in detail, with the Lindsay Center, changing the unit type, lowering the building, we felt it was a good mix, and we did add some trees which cut from parking, but add greenery throughout the project, which we agree with, and it does look a better pedestrian-friendly site. We did add the straight parking connection here, the straight access pathway, which was asked for in the last meeting. There is a easement for the property to the east here that is existing that we cannot change. So there is access, cross-access between the two sites. And this will also flow into here, which is a much better cut through than where it is existing, which would be right here. And we are committing to redo this light and making this access point much better. Currently, I would look at it as a crash hazard with exiting an entrance right so close to the light without connecting to it. Going through the whole project, we did, when we travel further north here, we added a ton of greenery through here and made this very walkable, and we outlined the path so you see all the connection points to the site. We made this as, this would be the parking here. This is the site I was looking for. That could connect from here, that we would designate for overflow parking from Lindsay Center. And we feel very comfortable that any overflow parking from the site here or underneath the parking lot can use the parking deck here. It is very close. It's not uncommon in our minds, especially with the city of Troy, and I think it would be a great utilization of a parking structure. We did add greenery. We reconstructed the site to make it more than green in our minds, and coming through here, we left the park, what we would call a community park for the site, that people can utilize the retail, utilize this as a greenery space, and also be a good connection here that you see from Big Beaver down the middle, and not just to see a parking lot. We did add the parking islands here with trees, and the retail, which we do not have anyone slated for right now, but it is up against the road. There are minor deviations that we just felt aesthetically it would look a little better lined up with the angles and so forth, on which the small variations on the placements of the building. All in all, we kept the same aesthetic look as you've seen last time, and are looking to improve the site. We're open to any comments, questions, and concerns. I could handle a lot of them. I also have a good team behind me that could talk more in detail with different issues.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Jonah or anyone from his team?
Yeah, Jordan, if you could review the traffic flow, mainly from Crooks into the site for the apartments on the south side and north of that, the new. So
this is Butterfield here?
Right.
And this is the connection you're talking about, correct?
Correct, that one. And then if I was driving in from Crooks through that traffic signal, maybe I'm coming from the north and I have to turn left.
Coming north.
Going south from north.
Headed southbound.
And then turn left into that area. But
Yes.
I would like to get to the apartments in the lower area, because going Yes, because if I were to continue south and try to turn left into that, there's no signal there, so it'd be more difficult to make that left turn. So
Yes.
show how a car would go going south on Crooks, turns left, and then goes to parking spaces. Oh, there's an
access point here.
Those two little white dashes
Yes.
is an open area?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are proposing to connect the sites here. It is not connected currently. There is a major grade elevation that is between the two properties here. So we have to push it back further east. And we felt it's better for stacking and so forth, that you can come back down here. There also is another access point further south on the property. And there is, with residential, it is people that live there. So they do have a customary route that they would take, that they would either turn in here. If the light's green, they may come down here and wait to turn left into here. It's repetitious with apartments, with living, that they'll have their certain known egress path that they would take, ingress and egress path, and they may be coming off of Big Beaver too. We want to make this as friendly as possible, but we also have to keep in mind that this is a very big site. We want to create it as walkable as possible, and we believe we're conquering this.
Okay, now you mentioned one more thing. You mentioned that area, that rectangle in blue before it disappears off the screen. Will that be, you said it was designated for the apartments in the south?
This is where we would want the overflow parking to meet the ordinance of the 300 feet that would be for in this building if we needed to overflow park from here. Personally, we don't think we're going to need this, but we do have it as a plan. I know recently the city also approved on their plan with some parking that was designated that wouldn't be built right now, and in case they do need it, that's the same concept here, but we actually have the parking, and as a whole, this whole parking, we do meet ordinance with the parking.
I understand, but the area in blue, you said it'll be designated for those, is there going to be signs above each?
It's designated if we do need it, and that's part of management with our multifamily. So if we do have an overflow parking issue, this is where we are able to, and this is agreement between the two properties.
Okay, I'm just concerned, again, having people in that the most south building have to go walk all the way to their parking structure to park their car in the snow. So I'm just thinking, if you designated those spots in that blue rectangle specifically for the south people, that would be...
If we did run into a parking issue, this is where we would designate them. Off the whole concept plan right now, they are not designated, they are future designations.
Okay. So in the future, if you had an issue, you would put signs there that would say it's for this building on the south.
And it's similar to a similar project down the street that was approved with future parking spaces if needed.
Okay.
And the same concept, but these are actually built.
Okay, thanks.
And paved.
Ms. Mulally.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm used to seeing buildings built from the place that I come, where it is compacted in a place, and parking tends to be an issue. And normally what they do is at least one spot is designated for one apartment unit, whether it is studio, one bedroom, two bedroom, one spot is designated, which means at least one person in that household can park closer to, or the closest point to, the apartments. Is that something that you're considering for the Lindsay Center area specifically? Because I, like Mr. Krent, I'm just looking at this, and it is a long walk for some residents. And if they have kids, if it is snowing, raining, all of those conditions, which we want to keep in mind, because we want happy residents there.
Yes.
Is that something that is considered? Because I know in the packet that was presented to us, there was a suggestion given about the parking structure having some kind of a indication to the residents or the people who are using it about how many spots are available, or if it's full or something like that, although I don't anticipate that happening, but still.
Yes.
But that was not.
So we currently have on Lindsay Center more than one parking space per unit. We have more than enough to designate even a lot of the units to have 2 parking spaces on site without using this extra designated parking here. We have 144 units, and excuse me while I get the exact number. 196 on site with Lindsay. So we do have more than enough to designate for 1 unit, 1 parking spot per unit. So yes, to answer your question, we do. And we can. And we will. We need to lease the units also.
Okay, I probably misunderstood. Earlier, I thought I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, we were deficient in parking, is what I had heard. Did I hear incorrectly, or?
There is a deficiency with the Lindsay unit, the Lindsay Center, for 2 parking spaces, which, if I understand you correctly, and Julie could definitely handle this better than I can, with the at least 1 designated parking spot on site, we have over that. We have, I believe it's 1.5, if my math is correct on the top of my head.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
Please, go ahead.
Per ordinance.
Make sure you introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Julie Kroll, Fleece and Vandenbrink. We did the traffic and parking analysis for the site. And so to answer the question, on the Lindsay site, they don't meet ordinance requirements, which would be 2 spaces per dwelling unit and 1 per efficient. So he's right that they have enough to designate 1 per unit, but they don't meet the ordinance. So that's why we did the parking study, was to see the projected parking demand for the Lindsay site. So we did this 2 ways, and I don't know if you guys have the parking study in front of you. Why is this so much feedback?
Yeah, I noticed that. Is that mic boosted too high?
Reminds me of being at Ozzy Osbourne concert in my teens. It's a new system, and Sean, can you hear the whining? Yeah, it's at 0.
Do you have volume control with the
They let Brent have that?
Does she, it's feedback. Control. You can bring her down as needed if you can't hear.
There's a lot of buttons here. I'm just saying.
Room.
Yep.
This is her, or that individual mic, so if you get feedback.
Technical term, by the way.
Yeah, I understand.
Try that. Testing.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
much better.
All right. My apologies.
That's not your fault.
You start to hear
So I just kind of wanted to walk
More
through
than
the
likely,
parking
though.
analysis process. Last time we were here, we had just done the parking analysis for 1 property. This time we combined them together. So the north property, the Kelly site, that one meets ordinance straight up. So we did it and said, okay, it meets. And then, so that's what you see in the first part, was comparing the parking they're providing with the ordinance. It meets. So then we moved on and we did the Lindsay site, and this site didn't meet ordinance, and we knew that. So we said, okay, we're going to look at the parking demand based on the ITE, which we've done several times now, using the 85th percentile. So this is that higher rate to see what the projected parking demand would be for the Lindsay site, not using the ordinance because we knew it was not going to meet ordinance. So that's what you see in the study, is we said, okay, the projected parking demand, and we based it on the bedrooms. So it's 198 bedrooms, and the projected peak parking demand for the site, 85th percentile, was 172 spaces. So then we compared that to the 196 that they're proposing on the site, and that showed a peak occupancy of 88% for that parcel, for that site. So just alone, based on what we're projecting, they're not going to need the shared parking, that they have enough parking to be at 88% capacity, which gives you enough buffer on that parcel. In the event that they did need extra parking, we then combined the 2 to see what the shared parking would be. So that's what you see on that Exhibit 1. I'm not sure which page it is in your packet. It looks this colorful graph. So that's where we took the north site and applied it into the shared parking model. So if you understand shared parking, it's where, say, the office users are going to be using the parking during the day, but at night they're not going to need the parking because they're gone home from work, and that people that live there can park overnight. So that's where you see the ups and the downs in the graph. So overall, on the site, you can see there's plenty of parking between the 2 sites combined when we consider shared parking as part of this. So that's the totality of the study, and looking at the site together, they had plenty of parking. looking at each parts individually, they still have enough parking. So I'm hoping that's more than answers your question.
Thank you. That was pretty good of an explanation. So what are your thoughts on the shared parking agreement that we still are considering as part of this application process?
Well, I think they still need a shared parking agreement in the event that something's off in our calcs, which I'm hoping no, and I think based on the data that they have that, they're going to have enough parking for that Lindsay Center site. But in the event that they do need extra parking, having that shared parking agreement in place between the two properties allows for that flexibility.
Correct. But with that buffer zone that Mr. Krent was talking about earlier, and if that is not designated as an overfill park, will that be designated as an overfill parking space for the Lindsay Center in the agreement? Because I just want to ensure that there is parking for all the...
Yes, if needed, that will be designated. And one thing that also I have to keep in mind is that apartment complexes never really operate at 100% occupant. There's always some lag of people moving out, people moving in. It's a rolling month, a rolling calendar year on how the occupancy actually goes. The ordinance takes into account that every unit is going to be occupied every time and needs 2 parking spots per unit. We do own and operate a few of these apartment complexes, and from what we've experienced, we've developed at 1.5 parking spots per unit and have more than efficient parking in very similar cities, which is Livonia, even Detroit, not downtown Detroit, further off Jefferson. In Southfield, we develop usually at 1.5. This is giving us over 1.5. We're very comfortable with this. And in the fact that we did have overflow parking, that people did want to collect cars, we would put them, we designate this area if needed.
It's almost like the land bank, right?
Yes,
So it's like the land bank parking, but they're going to build it, and then if they actually need it, then they'll sign it. Does that make sense?
So recently, the city did approve a land bank concept with that 1.5 parked cars that are going to be built. And if needed, they have the room to build to the more parking spaces.
Thank you.
Before I go back to the commissioners, Mr. Savidan.
So I understand what you're saying about land banked, because if you remember the Kurtz Road, we land banked, and that was a situation where there was going to be a grassy area. So Jordan, what would trigger this area in blue being designated? Would it be complaint based? Would it what would spearhead that happening?
These complexes are very management intense. In order for us to keep a leased building, we have to keep our residents happy. And we have people on site that will monitor parking. They see, and we wouldn't be able to lease units if we didn't have parking. So we're going to do whatever it takes to lease these units. It's almost business 101 in our minds, that we need to keep everyone happy. And if there is overflow parking that we needed, this is our plan.
So potentially someone goes on, gives a Google review that, that there was no parking, I didn't like living there, or I didn't sign a lease because it looked like I had to walk. So you're going to gather this information.
Yes.
And a light bulb's going to go off and say, we got to address this.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course. And we are on top of management. It's part of business, and it's not difficult to control, but it's the right thing to do.
I think Mr. Fox had a question, then Mr. Faison.
So I just wanted to ask a question, kind of give you the chance to speak on all of these, plans that you've presented. Can you just speak to how the buildings, the renovations that you're making to existing buildings, as well as the new buildings that you're going to be putting in, how do they take advantage of different building tips and tricks to improve energy efficiency? So I'm talking like keeping the temperature more efficiently storing temperature in the building so that heating and cooling costs are down, like putting solar panels on the parking lot lights so that you don't have to run them through your typical electricity. I'm just curious if you could speak to different design tactics that you guys have implemented in order to improve the energy efficiency of the overall site. Any and all.
Yes. So what we are building to the code standard, and what we do take into effect is all low E glass. We do have very efficient HVAC units, which are for each unit. So we don't do a mass system where it's constantly running. If a unit's not occupied, we are able to turn up or down the units so they're not always running. It's not we actually do individual units so it's not a constant run on these buildings. It's built to today's standard, which is a very high efficiency building. There are huge R ratings. It is a I don't want to say state of the art, but in our minds it is. This is a big investment here. It is important to us to operate these buildings efficiently. There's not much common area. There are, but there are also the actual units itself is what uses majority of the power, and those we take every step. It's all we try to build to. They don't have any more bronze standard and so it's certain water fixtures, all of the state-of-the-art LED. So it will be all LED lights. It will have recycling. It does have the plumbing fixtures are. Excuse me, I can't remember off the top of it. I think it's a star grade that it is. The building is as much as we can do. It does benefit us. It does help the occupants, and it boosts rents when we are able to lower efficiency costs. So,
Mr. Faison.
Yeah, thank you. And you may have touched on it, but my question was, the analysis of the parking study and the peak usage. And I would have thought the peak usage on the south of the site would be in the evening, and everybody would be home, and every car would be there, and then you would need the excess. So I was trying to understand the assumption of you would not need the peak usage.
So I want to give it one try, then you can, if that's okay. So it is taking into account right now the ordinance that every unit will be occupied at the same time, with every unit having 2 cars.
Or one if it's an efficiency,
One
right?
if it's an efficiency unit. That rare, we've never seen that case. There's always a revolving door with leasing coming up, or leasing that the units are being worked on or being turned over. Very rarely do they operate at 100%. And very rarely does every unit, besides the efficiency units, need 2 parking spaces per unit. There are a lot of single or one car occupancies, a couple with 1 car. It is not necessarily the norm that we see today that every unit needs 2 parking spaces. And this is the first time we have actually seen that in ordinances. And it went so, there is a land banks play, or what we propose here is basically the same thing as a land bank, but it's already built. It's not just green space.
So there's a vacancy
There's
in
factors,
reality that
yes.
occurs that creates some of that difference, or all
There are
of that
factors.
difference between
Yes,
the
there
nights.
are definite factors of occupancy, how many people are living in the units. If I was younger and renting here, if I wasn't married, I would have 1 car. I wouldn't have, and I would most likely want a 2-bedroom or whatever. We see that a lot. It's not uncommon for cities apartments to have a 2-bedroom with 1 car. It's usually, what we've seen in the past is usually around 1.5 parks per unit, and you have surplus parking at that time too.
Okay. Ms. Malala-Holly.
Thank you. So piggybacking on Mr. Fox's point here, this is a large area that we are talking about. Are you looking into, of course, first, how does the lighting look? Because we have so many surface parking and parking decks and people potentially walking back and forth. How does the lighting look in this location? enough to, of course, illuminate the areas, but also not so much to inundate the nighttime with a lot of light pollution. At the same time, any consideration or thought given to solar lighting as opposed to just the general use of electricity that we do?
Yes, with the lighting package, it should be, is there a lighting phase? There is a lighting phase here where it shows lumens on the floor, and there are shields that protect the units. There's some building lighting. It's a mixture of lighting, and we do meet ordinance with it. We don't overflow our property with lighting. There are shields. Sometimes it is a work in progress, too. There may be an apartment unit across the street that may be able to see a light, and we address it as planned, but as far as how I believe the city ordinance looks at it is the lumens on the floor and how much is projecting. It's a very hard to police simply because to take lumens on the floor, but we're very conscious of it. These are all LED lights. They run on it's a very efficient lighting. For solar lighting, it's better and safer for us to wire these LED lights. Fortunately, we do live in Michigan. We're one of the most gray states that we have a lot of gray days. We want these lights to work efficiency so people can walk, so they can use it. They are bright where they are supposed to be. We feel more comfortable, and it is not a huge, it's not a huge ordeal for LED lights to be run, and they will be on photometrics, so they do come on when it gets dark, and it turns off when the daylight comes. So, but yes, the lighting plan has been submitted. We're very comfortable with it. We light the site up as much as possible without being obnoxious to the neighbors.
Yes, Ms. Parakis.
You know what, overall, I'm a little bit disappointed. You were here a few weeks ago, and we gave you a lot of items to consider, and I don't really feel like a lot has changed. And maybe I wasn't clear the first time you guys were here, but to me, this is a really valuable piece of real estate, and I give you guys a lot of credit for repurposing a building because there's a need in the city for that, so you're doing a great job with the Lindsay Center building. But having said that, the intersection of Big Beaver and Crooks is talked about in the master plan, and it is referred to as the Troy City Center, the ultimate people place. It's meant to be a mixed-use, vibrant area with significant year-round activity, live, work, and play in a single area. The focus is supposed to be large mixed-use buildings with retail at grade and office and residential in the upper floors. I feel like you guys have brought the people in, tons of residential, and then a parking structure catering to Kelly Services offices, but really not creating that area that's supposed to draw people in and provide more services. And in fact, you're asking us for a special use to put residential on the first floor, where really the buildings should really have mixed use on the first floor to bring people in, not just the people who live there, but also for the people who live there. Why not offer services to them? I questioned the bank on the north side. Who's the bank for? That's not really exciting for anyone. This is a really prime area, and I feel like you've missed the mark. It says we're trying to have public plazas, public art boulevards, social interaction, pedestrian circulation and green space plan, fewer driveways away from the intersections, moving towards the creation of, this is all right out of the master plan, moving towards the creation of distinct districts rather than the collection of isolated towers. I really do feel like this is just building, parking. We're having all these discussions about parking, and I don't feel comfortable at all with the circulation for pedestrians. And these are all part of the design standards that, section .806, site plan review design standards, section C says enhance the character, environment, and safety for pedestrians and motorists through the following requirements. And there's 5 requirements which I don't think you meet. You also, I don't think, meet for 9.03A2 and B2, which talks about basically compatibility with the master plan. I really think that, I mean, would you guys consider shifting your two buildings, the apartment and the parking structure, to be parallel to Crooks, and then line it with some retail on the bottom and create sort of a more, an area that draws people in?
So unfortunately and fortunately, there is a major existing tenant here on site. It is Kelly Services. They have been here for a long time, and they've been a very big commitment to Troy here. And they are a big company here. We do have to work around and with Kelly Services. It is very difficult first to put retail on Crooks. It just doesn't work sometimes. And we are constricted on where some of the buildings are. We've looked at multiple different ways. Kelly Services is a big component in Troy, and we do have to cater to them also. They've been there for a long time, and we have to, I personally feel that we do have to respect them. And we are doing the best we can to make this as walkable and as vibrant as a development as possible. Big Beaver is still a very fast-moving road. It is very hard to do a mixed-use development on Big Beaver. First, it's blocking, which would never be approved with Kelly Services. This is the most we can do with a confined site. We feel that we've tried very hard to accommodate all the moving parts in here, the existing buildings, the existing tenants, the new buildings, and as much as we can do with the city of Troy. We do feel it fits Troy perfect. There are very similar developments even across the street. It does fit what was planned here. There are first floor retail spaces. There are a ton of banks up and down Big Beaver. It is part of Big Beaver Road, which is part of the whole community. It drives a lot of people to Big Beaver. It's important for customers, consumers. It's part of daily life. This would come before you again with the special land use, of course, if we do not have a financial commitment. We would like to market it to a financial institution. If it doesn't go, we will take the drive-through out, and we will be back in front of you saying this is not out there right now. It's very hard we can't go and market a plan that it's not approved, and then say, hey, now this is what we have. And it would come back for you guys when it is approved, when we do have someone. And I don't know if but we would do that. There are a lot of moving parts to the site, and it's very difficult to accommodate all the moving factors.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Okay, I mean, I can appreciate that, but, the Planning Commission doesn't have we're not in a contract with Kelly Services, so when you tell us that, I mean, I don't want to say it's not our problem, but, you're coming to us and asking for deviations on parking and special uses, and I'm not really sure that it really fits. I mean, the other part that I disagree with is the corner of Big Beaver and Crooks, and it's a no-build area because of Kelly Services, but really that part should be developed. And it's true, we can't have people turning in right at that intersection. That's why you would develop the property and have the entries be at different areas. You could redevelop it. So maybe you have to talk to Kelly Services and explain to them that there's certain things that you're not allowed to do with the city as well, because it's in violation of the master plan. It's in the zoning ordinances. But north of Big Beaver, east of Crooks, people were really excited about what went in there. The people who moved into Zen and the apartments at Morton's, and you created an area not just for them, but for other people from all over the city go to that destination and hang out, and they like that area. This, to me, doesn't offer anything to anyone. I mean, you're not selling me on a bank, but you could do something a little bit more interesting to bring other people in, but also for the people who are moving in there. I don't think that in and of itself, the type of, like I said, I give you a lot of credit for repurposing. I think Lindsay Center apartments are going to be cool, but the area itself, while it's prime location, you're not really offering a lot that I think you should be, and it's not really in the spirit of the master plan, in my opinion.
So the property directly across the street has the same issue with the no build on the corner. Unfortunately, we cannot build on it. It's legal binding. This will never get built at that point. It would sit vacant, which I think is a shame in my mind. Across the street, the corner is a parking lot, and not a lot of trees in the parking lot either, which is part of the master plan, but has deviated. Unfortunately, we cannot do it. There are restrictions to what we can propose. This is what we are able to propose. We have talked to all the parties at B. It is important to them. They have been here for a very long time, made a very big commitment, the city of Troy, and we respect them for that. And if this is what is on the table, there's not much we can do. This will just never get built. And it does meet, in our minds, it does meet what is across the street. We are bringing big businesses here. We are bringing livelihood here. Across the street is a one-story retail building. It may be a congregation place, and we hope to have a congregation place here too. We're just as excited as the property across the street.
Mr. Tagle.
Well, I was going to jump back on the parking issue, and I do have to thank Ms. Parakas for some of the comments she made. I agree with her on a lot of points. But just, and again, I'm sorry we're beating a dead horse here. We talk about adequacy or number of parking, and Julie has made the presentation that the combined sites exceed the required. But the other component of parking is location. And I still am troubled that the new building that's just south of the parking deck, you talk about parking under the building. Well, there's only 61 parking spaces under the building, correct? I mean, it's not all parking under the building. For sure. Okay. I'm just concerned that the folks that live in that building are going to park as close as they can to their building or to the entrance into that building, so that if there is a need for to make up the deficiency for times that we've not talked about guest parking, we've not talked about where you're going to put the snow when we have 4 or 5 inches of snow, and is that going to start to shorten the number of available spaces? That are those spaces that we're designating as a land bank type space, are they really going to be available for those people in the southern portion of the buildings? And I think the solution has been discussed about identifying it. And again, it sounds like the parking is kind of a free-for-all. If there's a space, you can park there no matter where your unit is, right? So if I come home late one night, I may or may not have a space anywhere near where I want to park. So I don't know if there's a way to start to identify spaces. I don't even know, you haven't spoken, how do the spaces underneath the building, I know those are at a premium. I know those will show up on the rent. But are those designated, or are those first come, first serve as well? So I think there could be some more done to make the parking a little bit more accommodating to those most remote in this site. I mean, I talked last time about looking at maybe a little different configuration of the buildings on the property, so that parking deck is a little more central. I'm getting the sense that that parking deck is there because that's where Kelly wants it. That's not necessarily the best place on the property to serve the people you want to serve in your buildings, but I could be wrong with that.
So we believe in how we place this, it does service both buildings. So a parking deck does, you may have a persona that no one wants to park in a parking deck to go to their unit. It also is covered parking. It also is we do live in Michigan with snow, with rain or something, they do want covered parking. That's what the parking deck would serve for also. We will stipulate that in the event that we do need the extra parking, that we are able to take these parking spaces and label them for Lindsay Center parking and put more people in the parking structure. We do feel comfortable with this. We do feel that we have enough to adequately supply parking for on site the parking structure is right next door to the parking structure, within maybe 30 feet-ish, maybe 40 feet parking aisleway. And it is very close. It is basically parking to go into maybe a double cross parking with a park on each side in a row. It is very close. And when you do lease the unit, you do know where you're going to park usually. You do have instances where it's memory that I'm going to pull into the parking structure. I like the parking structure. It's 40 feet away from the store. I could walk here, here, and here. I don't mind stipulating that these are the designated parking for Lindsay Center if we need them. It's a land bank play that has been accepted in the city before, too. I have no problem saying that.
What's the hesitancy to designate them today that this is parking for the Lindsay Center?
We don't think we're going to need them at all.
Well, okay, I understand you don't think you're going to need them, but you've just made a strong case that the parking deck is so close for the people in the new building. Put them in the parking deck. It's covered parking. Why wouldn't you push them there now so that the folks in the Lindsay or in the building behind the Lindsay Center have that as overflow parking? What would be the hesitation to do that today?
Because those parking spaces are mine. If we labeled them parking for Lindsay only, could sit there vacant, and we would like the people that use them. We want to make this site as viable as possible.
Well, I said you made a strong case. I would park in the parking deck because it's covered parking. I don't have to clean my car off tomorrow morning when it snows tonight.
Yes,
right?
but if we did label all those parking spaces, and Lindsay does not need them, they sit there vacant.
You're overparked. Between the two sites, you're overparked. You got more than enough parking, so they lay vacant, as opposed to the parking deck spaces laying vacant. I mean, I guess I'm not sure.
It gives this renter an option.
Pardon me?
It gives this renter an option.
I don't know what you mean.
It gives the 5-story, it gives them options. So they have the option of parking in the deck or here. And if we do need them, we can put them in the deck.
Is it going to cost more to park in the deck? If I have a unit, no.
No.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, the financial side of this still needs to be worked out on what we can build. Right now, no.
Okay.
It may change in the future. It does depend on certain plays on how this thing is built and what it is. It's a difficult site. It really is. There are constraints about how you design this building with the moving parts. Unfortunately, there are restrictions we have that we are trying to work around, and we try to put the best pieces to the puzzle. There are big commitments, big taxpayers that we do want to appease, and we feel we deserve them respect on how they put a staple here in the city. We want to keep them happy. We want them to stay here for another 50 years. And doing so, we do make difficult decisions and how it lays out. This parking deck could work for both on how it's positioned. It does work for the office. They are a major tenant here. They do have 180,000 square feet of office space that they do want to get back into the office. Office today is tough. We want to push people into the office in our minds as much as possible. It makes the area better. You want to bring people back as much as we can, we will. And this parking deck serves for both. It's right in the middle. It utilizes both sides of it. If we needed parking for Lindsay Center, we are committed to designating it. We could put that in writing, that we can take these away. Recently, there was a land make play that was done by the city. And this is the same concept. If needed, then we can put this in play.
The difference here is you're going to allow people from the 5-story to park there for some amount of time. And then if you find out that you need those parking spaces, now you're going to tell them, you can't park here anymore. Now you're going to have to go to the parking deck. It's different than land banking, because land banking, you don't park anywhere until the need is there.
We would stipulate that with renting to them. With the lease, we would stipulate that. We would go in front of them. We are not looking for an unhappy customer. It's the ordinance also takes into account that this will stay full 100% all the time. There are factors that don't come into play.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I'm just am puzzled by the resistance to identify those spaces as overflow spaces for the Lindsay Center property. I can't see the rationale from the presentation you're making why those spaces are so sacred for now, unless you're taking spaces in the parking deck that have to be held for Kelly. So if that's not the case, I don't understand.
Give as much options to the renter as far as we can. It does make a better product.
Okay. Mr. Beekner.
First floor residential, what's your plan?
These projects are very difficult to get going.
It doesn't meet code, right?
Yes, and this is a point that I would like to talk about. It is pushed back off Big Beaver in the corner, and I know this is still the Big Beaver District. I don't know where the Big Beaver District ends, Ben. Is it right after this building? Is it further?
Just south.
Just south of this. We understand that it is a non-permitted use. We're going through this process right now, and we need to make this as successful, a win-win-win for the parties to be, the city, and also us. And to get these properties going, this is a very big commitment. Taking off units just hurts this project that much more. And what I would ask, I know we can't, from what I understood, and I misunderstood how Ben was saying it, you cannot give the permit. It would be a request for a special use on the property. Am I wrong there, Ben?
It's not permitted. It would go through a different process. A different board would have to consider it. It's not something the planning commission can consider.
And so we would take those off right now, but we want to ask that you are open-minded on when we come back and say, look, we would like to put these units back in. We feel it is off the road. We don't feel it's good retail, and we don't want it to sit vacant. It's very difficult to lease that space. We're in retail. This is our fourth project in the city of Troy, and we do consider ourselves retail experts. We don't feel it's good retail. We don't feel we have a good renter. And the last thing we would want is that to sit vacant. It's just not good for anyone. And we will take them off right now and say, can we please work with Troy? And we will take those off. But if we do come back with a special ask for this, please just be open-minded to it to make this project better for everyone. Vacancies do no good for the city. We feel it's very difficult to lease retail space there. I think the Big Beaver retail should be further north. And the building that we put in front to accommodate in front of the parking structure to accommodate some sort of activity, the transparency, was a good compromise. And we just ask you that you keep an open mind about these units because it is difficult.
My next question, so is it just one restaurant on the Crook side? It's right by the parking deck? Is that a restaurant?
I don't know what would go in there.
Okay, but otherwise no restaurants?
There very well could be restaurants. A lot of the retail users are fast casual, service-oriented. Retail is actually very difficult today. There's not a lot of true retailers out there where you can go and buy a T-shirt or so forth. A lot of it is fast casual and service-oriented, and we would like to put services there that could accommodate the whole site where these units could utilize that space, or even if it's clubhouse space that can make it more vibrant. That is our goal. There will be restaurants on site for sure. That's one of the big components of commercial real estate today. Are fast casual and service-oriented users, which you would see all up and down Big Beaver.
I live nearby. I work even closer. Just north of that, I think I counted in my head about 7 restaurants. I go there all the time with my family and my work friends. And then I was at the council meeting last night on Long Lake and Crooks, and they had this vibrant, more green space, more gatherings. I'm not just saying pickleball, I'm not just saying bocce ball and whatever, but I want to go there. I'm excited to go there. I could walk there. I have no desire to go there right now. And you never know what else you're going to add, but I'm a little, of some of the words that my other council members have said, a little underwhelmed of just, I'd like to see more green space. I'd like to see more reason to go there for your customers as well. And that's just my opinion.
We tried as much as we could with this green space. We left a big portion of green space right in the middle of the property that people can accommodate. They can sit and eat. There are courts on site there. As much as we can, we do. We want to work with as much as we can here. Fortunately, we live in Motor City. There's a lot of cars, but there will be tables and congregating places. And there are a lot of other photos that were submitted. I believe they are in your packet that we did go back and look at this.
Before I call on Mr. Fox, I want to make sure Mr. Hudson has a question or any statement because he's been silent. So.
No, I've got a question, but I think I'd like to remind everybody that a master plan is nothing more than a wish list on behalf of the city. This intersection at Big Beaver and Crooks has been worked over and worked over and worked over, and it's really tough to satisfy all the wishes set forth in a master plan for some areas. I think this is a difficult parcel. I'm not sure you're going to get anybody doing retail, but it's business oriented, and I like what you've done. So, in spite of other commissioners' thoughts, I like this project.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Fox.
So from what I'm understanding, a separate item that we're going to be voting on, well, one of many aspects in terms of the special uses granted for this property will be that first floor requirement on the U-shaped building, for all of which that we can permit. We can't permit, per the ordinance, the side of the building fronting Crooks. If you find yourself in a situation where we've approved the rest of the build, but we have not granted that specific special use, we have said that that needs to be commercial on that first floor. Trying to think of how to phrase that into a question. How would, as a development, this whole, do you see that being something that would draw people into the site in order to kind of meet that requirement that some of the commissioners have stated, that they want to see more that brings people into the area instead of just the residents who live here walking down and out of the area?
We will try our best. I couldn't answer that question.
Okay.
We would try our best.
That's fair.
I'm not going to lie. We don't know. We would try, and we understand the wish list.
I appreciate the honesty.
And I don't live too far away from here, and I do take pride in our developments and what we do, and I want this to be perfect. I want it to be a good site. I plan to keep this property and hand it on to my kids, and hopefully they don't mess it up. And we do take pride in what we do. So.
Before I throw it over to Mr. Carlisle, I'm going to ask you a question that's similar to Mr. Fox's. And at our last meeting on the Lindsay Center site, we had asked you to increase the number of trees within the parking area itself, which it looks like you did. What would be your thoughts? And I can't speak for the other commissioners. I'm only one vote, but what would be your thoughts if we said, we like the Lindsay Center site as long as there's a shared parking agreement, but we want you to go back to the drawing board on the northern section? Would you be amenable to that, or do you want this whole thing to be one package deal?
My concern is that this will never get built. And we would come with certain parts of it, and it would stay vacant land, which is wrong in my mind, but it is, everyone has titles of opinions. I don't think this will get built.
So if we approve this, the Lindsay Center site, you wouldn't build that new building, the new apartment building, without the entire property as being one build?
We would need to master plan this. It doesn't work, and we would come, if that's the way it looked at, we would start on Lindsay, and my worry that it will never get built. There are moving components that we just simply cannot agree to, and we're trying to appease everyone, and we're working diligently to do that. And we have looked at other options. It has been brought up. We have looked at, talked to Kelly, and what we can do. And this is an agreement between us that we're presenting to you guys. Unfortunately, there are difficult situations that we cannot work around, and we would most likely just sit there with a vacant parking lot that collects water right now. And it's not right.
Okay. Mr. Carlisle.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, just so everyone's on the same page with regard to the zoning requirements. The area we're talking about the residential use for this section of the building right here. I believe if I looked at the floor plans correctly, it's 6 units, right? So there's 6 units that are residential that front on here on Crooks. There's been a lot of talk about whether retail would work there or not retail. I'm not a developer, I'm not a marketer, et cetera. I want to be very clear. It does not require its retail use. It just simply says non-residential. So it could be office use, it could be community gathering use, it can be common area open space or common area use for the residential development itself. It could be the pool could be located there. So it doesn't have to be retail use for rent for an outside entity. It simply just has to be non-residential use. I just want to be very clear about what the ordinance states with regards with activity. Yes, but it does not have to be retail per se use.
And thank you. Ben, what I've gathered is that they would like some sort of retail use there. And we will try our best. And if it is other space, we want to make this work. We need to make this a viable project that could actually succeed. And all we ask is that we keep an open mind with those units that are pushed back that do have a community center right in front of it. And there's a lot of community space here. And although it's great, we want to draw other uses besides the residents. It is part of the master plan, as we talked about. And we are going to make a commitment to try. And we just want to keep an open mind on the best use for that particular space. It's hard to say that one space can actually be defined in an ordinance. In my mind, there should be leeway on certain situations, and I just ask that it's a partnership and we work together on that.
Mr. Takel.
Tell me again, what is the block on the west side of the parking structure?
The block? So
there's a rectangle, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
We don't have a specific use right now. We do know that we need to have a transparency for lively interaction with pedestrians from the road. We put it there to block a parking structure from the main floor so you just don't see cars. It's a space that may be a office or a quasi-office use. It'd be hard to lease for retail, but we will try. Or it could be community. We are going to fit in the ordinance on what it is there.
What I'm thinking is, why doesn't that space move into the west end of the residential tower? That gets rid of whatever you were planning for that activity, put it in the west end of the west residential tower. I mean, you can screen this. You don't need a building or a space like that to properly screen the parking structure. It can be done in many ways.
We can look at that. We thought
I think that's going to get you past this whole point of residential.
That may be a very good. We were under the impression that the city would want that there, and we're open to that.
Mr. Carlisle.
Yeah. So in the Big Beaver District, decks are permitted to front on the main road, but the first floor of a deck has to be a non-parking use. So if the deck was rotated similar to how Ms. Practice said, then the whole first floor of the deck could be.
What about a park? I mean, you say certainly does it need to be a building?
I'd have to look exactly what the terms are of the zoning ordinance. I mean, that's something Brett and I were just throwing around, and could you switch that over? And then one of the things we did note is that if a parking deck that fronts on Big Beaver, the first floor of that deck has to be a non-parking use. I'll have to look in terms of what the zoning ordinance requirement is. But I think it's a good point worth considering.
Yes, we're open to that. If we could turn that into a park, we're happy.
I'm sorry if I could ask one more. On the I guess that would be the southwest corner of the Lindsay Center. There's according to the drawings, there's a retention basin there.
Yes.
Have you ever considered burying that basin and making that a park area for the residents?
Parking or park?
Park, green space.
Green space. Our plan is to fix it up, and we use the detentions as green space. We do put aerators in there, so there is some water flowing that it does clean it up a lot. It's actually a part of our landscape plan. Is
it going to be a wet pond then?
Oh, yes.
Year-round?
Oh, yes.
So it could be a skating rink?
They never really look at. I think we keep it aerated. Is it air?
Well, not if it's going to be a skating rink, but I'm just saying, make it. I understand what water feature would be nice, but so would an activity area for the residents of the southern tier of property.
And we are doing that on the other side of the property. So there is the detention here, and there is another outdoor area that we are planning on.
Oh, okay. I didn't see anything on the drawings that identified anything like that.
It's
on the
green
north
space
side.
right now, and we would. I'm not sure what exactly we would do there, but we would make it some sort of green space. I think there's some picnic tables out there right now.
Well, you have a very talented architect on your team. I think they could come up with some creative outdoor people spaces other than just...
Yes, for sure.
All right, Ms. Malala-Holly.
Thank you. Just a quick observation. What was the reasoning behind a bank that you envisioned on this site?
When we looked at Big Beaver, and we've done a lot of work on Big Beaver, there are a lot of financial institutions, and they do make the projects viable. It makes them make sense for developers like us to actually build them. We want the option of looking at this and taking it to financial institutions. If we don't, we'll be in front of you with a new site plan saying, look, we have to turn this bank into parking here and add simply straight retail. It is a big use. It is a big use on Big Beaver, and there are banks up and down there that we felt we could attract a good, solid business to Big Beaver. And there is a retail that we can do that. And that's the thinking behind it, and we want to market it to a good user.
I guess where I'm thinking is, as you mentioned earlier, you want people to come back to office, and you want them to use the office space more than what we are currently using. I'm like looking at that space and thinking, would another restaurant, another retail space, some kind of, would it benefit the residents and Kelly Services as people move back into offices as opposed to having a bank there?
Oh, we'll have all of them. There will be restaurants there. We do have an idea that we would target certain restaurants. We do want a good mix. It's hard to have, we wouldn't have all restaurants. We would have some service, some restaurants, some fast casual, some sit down. It's a good mix of what we would go and market to attract to the center. A bank is a good mix. They take a good amount of square footage. They don't have a high usage per se. A lot of it is digital now, but drive-throughs are important to banks. They don't get very much use, but they are a good user of good space. They make projects viable to developments. But there will be restaurants. We do have an idea that we are going to have sit-down restaurants, fast casual, service-oriented, that everyone can congregate and go forth.
You know, Mr. Faison and I find financial institutions very exciting, but probably not the average person, so, Mr. Fox.
Maybe not after Silicon Valley, but.
No, definitely not.
Do you mind clarifying, you made a comment about the intersection with Butterfield and how you guys are in the middle of like some kind of committee process with that? Sorry, I might have misheard you. Because my thought is, admittedly, I think there is a good amount of commercial across Crooks Road. And that's why when I was looking at this development, I was asking OHM about if there's been evaluations of all of the different pedestrian walkways. I know in the main intersection there at Big Beaver and Crooks, that is a very nice, new, you can tell it was just redone intersection that I've seen people walking on quite often. What I'm imagining is that if you put residents in that Lindsay site to the south, they are not going to want to walk all the way up to Crooks and Big Beaver to make that crossing. They're going to look at Butterfield, which currently has a crosswalk, and see about crossing to the commercial on the other side of Crooks there. So I was just wondering, because I thought I heard you allude to some kind of, if you're in a committee to review it or something like that with the Butterfield intersection.
Yes, so this is a new proposed intersection that you see now. Right now, it actually goes somewhat like this. There's a access point here, just south of the light, and then there's another entrance that loops around here and goes like this. So this is the improved intersection with the crosswalk, and there's only so much we can do with that. It is out of our jurisdiction with Oakland County Road Commission. But this was something that we came up, and it is a very large reconstruction of that site and lines everything up so it does flow. People can walk, they can turn in without. This is, in my mind, a little odd intersection there that is being enhanced with this whole development.
Thank you for the clarification. I've heard that comment probably 20, 30 minutes ago, so I just wanted to get some follow-up on it.
Ms. Paracas.
Did you have a response for my suggestion about moving the two middle buildings parallel to Crooks to have the parking garage be shared by both Kelly and your apartments?
Yes, we have looked at that. We have reviewed it. Fortunately, it does not work for the parties to be on the site. It would just never get done. We're dealing with a few different components here that we need to be cognizant about. And this one, it was able to share both the parking structure with Kelly Services and the apartment building. Pushing it further east and south, it's not conducive to the office space. And it is a big office building. You need to have convenient parking for everyone.
Well, they've gone all this time without a parking structure, so they're now asking for a parking structure. And, you're asking the city for leeway, but you're not asking Kelly Services to work with you on doing something creative and different and something that attracts the community. And on one hand, you're saying, well, we're going to try. We want restaurants. We want retail. And then on the flip side, you're saying, but we hope you'll work with us and allow us to do residential on the first floor. I'm not really convinced that you're making the best use. I get it that it's difficult, but I don't really know that, allowing all these, something that I don't think is great is the solution. I think that maybe you've got to consider something else.
We have considered it, and we have looked at it. And please know that this isn't just the first time that we've come up. This is the best of the worlds that we could put together and agree upon. And if it's not, it's not. We understand, and we'll sit there. Unfortunately, we can't do the exact opposite of what it is, where you elongate the parking structure. It's just not conducive to a very large building in Troy. We are working around certain obstacles here. There is close to a 200,000 square foot office building that needs somewhat convenient parking when you add all of these components into it. And
So they would still cross over, they would just be entering it from the width side instead of, the length side. If you flipped it and put it along Crooks, it's still right next to Kelly Services.
Oh, I know, but it is also pushed back a little. It does go further south, and we have looked at this with them. I'm not telling you you're wrong at all. We have looked at them. It was not agreed upon. This is the overall site that we are able to present to you today and say this is the best of the ability that we can do with the confining factors on the site.
But, and they understand that if we don't approve it tonight, they don't get their parking structure, right?
Yes, yeah, and it would sit vacant land.
Okay.
Any more questions for Mr. Jonah?
Quick one.
Yes, Mr. Krantz.
That park area on the far east, can you just give us an overview of what's in that, what elements are in that? Yeah, that area.
Do you recall? So I'm sorry, I gotta refer to the experts. It is a community space again that we wanted to share with Kelly Services and the multifamily components that everyone can use. There are, I believe, tennis courts back there and pickleball. And it's a gathering community space.
Yeah. And the only outdoor pool is the one in that 5-story
Yes.
building there? Okay.
Thanks. Any more questions for Mr. Jonah or anyone from his team? Seeing none, we'll have you go ahead and take a seat, and we'll go to the agenda now with each individual item. First is special use approval and preliminary site plan review, file number SU JPLN 2022-0004, proposed 2690 Crooks Road Apartments, east side of Crooks, south of Big Beaver, which is 2690 Crooks, Section 28, currently zoned BB Big Beaver District. Would anyone like to offer, before I do that, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? We've already had the public hearing, but want to offer the opportunity. I don't think anyone from the public, aside from the experts and the consulting team, are here. So we'll bring it back to the commission for any kind of a resolution. Mr. Fox.
Well, so should we discuss or should we resolve first?
You can do either, whatever you would prefer. It's better, I'm sure Mr. Hudson would say it's better to do a resolution first, but we'll be kind of flexible.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman.
So if you'd like to make a resolution, I'm sure Mr. Hudson would appreciate it. Or you can ask a question.
Yeah, well, I guess I wanted to, there were some comments that I was reserving specifically for the commission discussion, instead of grilling the applicant, because it was kind of more just stating where I'm at with the project. I am personally of the opinion that I think that one of the biggest amendments that I would want to make is not granting the special use on that U-shaped building or one or potentially multiple of the ones that have been requested of us.
Before you go to that one, though, we're dealing just with the Lindsay
Oh, we're
Center.
doing the South
so-
Lindsay site? Then I will hold off for now.
Okay, all right. Any proposed resolutions or questions on the proposed Lindsay Center site plan?
Personally, for me, Chairman, I'm finding it difficult to say yes because the applicant is sounding pretty resistant on the parking, and that we discussed at length, and Mr. Tagle pointed out some very good points during our discussion. So I'm struggling. I'm not there yet.
Ms. Parakis?
Yeah, I would also not be in favor of this. Also, it's difficult for me when an applicant comes and they're proposing a project, but it sounds like their main audience is not even their customer. And I have a problem with that because I think it's going to dictate every decision going forward. And I think the applicant needs to focus on the customer who they're building for and not the third party that, is somehow involved. So I'm ready to propose a resolution unless, others want to say anything.
Yes, Mr. Fox?
Yeah, sorry, I did. I wanted to say, so after our last meeting where we kind of had a discussion about parking structures and distance that you I drove out to the site, I oriented myself as best I could, and I put myself in that parking structure, and then I walked down to the Lindsay building, down to the proposed addition to the Lindsay building. I would say that I would have to kind of defer to the comments of the OHM traffic consultant, where I think that walk is ultimately doable. I think if we do have people in those southern two most buildings who do end up parking in that structure, that is a reasonable distance to walk in order to park. I do also want to add in, so I have my brother is a planner for the city of Sterling Heights, and I don't want to direct quote him, but he did kind of point out that the whole 2 requirements per, or 2 spaces per living space is viewed by many in the industry as overparked. I think that there is a chance, given that the applicant has presented 1.5 as the standard they use in communities, that is something that maybe we as a board may want to look into, but I don't necessarily think that parking should be the condition with which we decide whether or not to approve or disapprove the site. I am of the opinion that parking is not the issue. To me, the issue is more the lack of pull, which again, I would potentially be, and this is referencing the Northernmost project, which I know we're not on. To me, by adjusting some aspects of the Northernmost project, you can reach that pull by adding in more non-residential uses such as businesses, et cetera. As for the southern lot, given that the only issue seems to be parking, I would personally be in favor of saying that the southernmost is, I'd love to see it greener. I'd love to see more green energy attached to it. Obviously, you guys know me by now. But I do not believe that parking is a condition that we should deny the project based off of, just off of my own personal opinions. But I am one of 9 with the rest of you, so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Nobody listens to me. Can I suggest that we have a resolution?
I think Ms.
And then
Parakis,
continue the
yes.
discussion?
I think Ms. Parakis was getting ready to make one, so go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, but let me respond really quick to Mr. Fox.
I want to order. My God, let's do it the right way instead of bickering among ourselves.
Ms. Parakis, why don't you make your resolution, and then you can respond to Mr. Fox.
Okay. Special use approval and preliminary site plan review, file number SUJ PLN 2022-0004, proposed 2690 Crooks Road Apartments, east side of Crooks, south of Big Beaver, 2690 Crooks, section 28, currently zoned Big Beaver District. I'm reading the wrong thing, aren't I? Hang on, sorry.
It's okay.
Resolved, the Planning Commission hereby denies for the following reasons. I mean, let me see, because it's two things they're asking for, the shared parking between 911 and 999 West Big Beaver Road and 2629 Crooks Road, and resolve that special use approval and preliminary site plan approval for the proposed 911 and 999 West Big Beaver use development, southeast corner of Big Beaver. They're in the same resolution. I'm confused.
I think this is on page 9.
Yeah, I'm reading off 9.
Yep, 9.
Oh, that's the shared parking between the two?
Yeah, that's what I think it is.
Okay, so southeast corner, Big Beaver and Crooks, PIN 88-20-28-101-032-034 and 047, Section 28, currently zoned Big Beaver District, be denied for the following reasons. The parking for not, I don't agree with the shared parking. I wouldn't approve that. It also doesn't meet the design standards of 8.06C1 through 5, 8.06A1. Does not comply with the special use standards of 9.03A2 or B2. And now to address your,
Need a second.
oh, sorry.
Is there a second to the motion? I'll second it for discussion purposes. Go ahead, you can debate it.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the parking. I mean, one of the, we totally eliminate senior living from these apartments. They've got elevators, their apartments, their first, they're one level, which are all things that population would otherwise fit into this area, and being able to drive up and park and have their elevator. And then now with no guaranteed parking, that sort of eliminates that whole population. Because I can guarantee you, seniors are not going to be open to, coming home and not finding close parking. And I mean, I've lived in the city before and I walked, but when you come home and it's raining and you've got a trunk full of groceries, to me, that walk is too long. We don't live in a city. We don't live in Chicago. This is Troy. So I think that it's going to be a problem, the parking.
Any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Fox?
Yeah, I guess to respond to previous comments, I think there's something to be said that not every development is going to appeal 100% to every consumer. In the same way that the Somerset Park apartments don't currently appeal to senior residents because they don't want family housing typically, unless it is specifically senior oriented. I would argue that ultimately that is something that the market would need to decide. I think that also kind of touches on the parking issue as well. If someone isn't willing to make that walk, they won't rent that apartment. And that is something that ultimately is on the developer and on the owner of the land to really, they're the one who kind of take that risk ultimately. I think just in terms of whether or not this development has the parking available for it, I think it ultimately does. They ultimately meet the ordinances as long as they provide the shared agreement, that being the key element there. So considering that it is not only within our ordinances, but also within reason, I would hazard, it just seems like, and I should say, it's not one of these things where I think that this development is perfect. It's just, it's specifically on the issue of parking, I think it has met what is required of it, if that makes sense. So that would be, I would not be in favor of the current motion to deny, is suppose where I'll leave that.
Any further discussion? Mr. Krentz?
Just want to echo Mr. Fox's sentiments on parking. I think that 1.5 plus the study of 85% sways me that they've got adequate parking. And by including the shared parking agreement, I think they're adequately parked.
Any further discussion?
I agree with Mr. Krent and Mr. Fox on the parking.
As I said earlier, it is a difficult decision because I do want the buildings to be repurposed. I am in favor of doing whatever we can to repurpose these buildings. Mr. Fox did convince me to think otherwise, that I know not all projects will hit the 100% that we always hope to see. But I'm also considering what the applicant said earlier, that if we do not support one, then the entire thing falls apart. Am I correct in my understanding? That's how they put it together? If one doesn't get approved, then both tend to not be developed, right? The north or the south side.
If I understand it correctly, even the petitioner has said that if they're not both approved, it doesn't sound like they are willing to move forward with either one unless it's a bulk deal. But I guess that would be up to the developer to do that. Mr. Carlisle, you were raising your hand, kind of.
I fully appreciate the concern of the Planning Commission with both these, but again, they're two separate applications. They should be two separate votes, and they should be considered as two separate projects with regards to approvals. The shared parking kind of muddies it a little bit, but I would tell you do not only because don't think of it as if you approve one, you approve the whole project. It's two separate projects with two separate motions with two separate deliberations.
For the clarification, yes.
So to piggyback on that, if I may, so to be very, very clear, we're talking, the resolution was for this site, the southern site.
Yep.
2690 Crooks. The resolution was for denial. So if you vote in the affirmative, you are voting for denial. Okay?
Mr. Tagle.
A question. That site, as it sits on its own, is deficient 51 parking spaces.
I would...
So where does the shared parking agreement, does it umbrella both? How does that work?
So the site would have to utilize parking to the north.
Okay, so we're not, I mean, I understand what you're saying. We're voting on the southern portion, or the property, but with the caveat that the parking has to extend.
So I guess I probably should have jumped in earlier, but it was a really good, very interesting and respectful back and forth between you and the petitioner. There was a lot. I learned a lot. But this is not site plan approval. This is special use approval that they're seeking. So they're asking the Planning Commission they are asking for preliminary site plan approval. They're asking for special use approval, which is subjective, and there's numerous conditions, and the Planning Commission has the ability to condition approval for special use approval. They're also asking for relief. So with those factors together, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Dufresne, but the Planning Commission is not in a position where they have to ask Mr. Jordan's permission to designate this land banked area, if you will, in the event that it's needed in the future. You have the authority now to condition approval on using that space, designating it as part of special use approval for tenants for that building. You don't have to ask his permission. You have the authority as a planning commissioner to require that as a condition of approval for special use approval. So and he's obligated to provide that as a condition of special use approval. You don't have to ask his permission.
Got it. Well, that kind of leads me to my point.
And that's, I'm sorry, Mr. Tagle. That's regardless of 9/11 gets approved. That's for this site. Thank you, Ben.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that, because my feeling before that statement, Mr. Savedant, was that we've asked the petitioner to meet us on this, and he was adamant to say, I'm not going to meet you on that, I can't do it. And that bothers me, because he's asking for a lot of stuff from us. But now, we can require that there be designated parking for the Lindsay Center in that land bank zone, if you will. So, for me, I think that is important for the success of this project. And, there are a lot of considerations here. Parking is an extremely important element. I don't want to dismiss it. As it's been said, we're not just talking about 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds who can walk freely. We're talking about moms with children or groceries or the weather we see in Michigan. I believe those all have to be taken into consideration as part of an overall examination of this project and what is being presented.
Mr. Krent?
Yeah, just a quick thought on that parking situation. If the southern property is approved, they can still have a shared parking agreement with the owners of the northern property. So it doesn't really, if the northern one isn't approved, doesn't mean they can't have a shared parking agreement. So I think it's fine.
Any further discussion?
I would be more comfortable now if we can put that on the plan as saying that we do need that to be set aside for parking for this parcel to be approved.
That would be, right now, we're debating and then voting on a denial, so if, depending on what happens with this motion, if a second motion were to come forward, then that could be part of the motion. So right now, I think everyone has had their piece, and why don't we vote on the motion to deny? So if you vote yes, you're denying the proposed special use and preliminary site plan. So I think we're ready for the roll call. So remind you, yes vote is to deny.
It is for denial, yes. Mr. Hudson?
No.
Mr. Krent?
No.
Mr. Lambert?
No.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
No.
Ms. Barakis?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
No.
Mr. Biegner?
No.
Mr. Faison?
No.
Mr. Fox?
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, now we're coming back again to the commission. Does somebody like to make a motion for approval at this point? Mr. Fox.
I would like to make a motion to approve. Resolve, the Planning Commission hereby approves shared parking between 911 and 999 West Michigan Road and 2690 Crooks Road. Is that where I would insert the requirement about the parking? Is on that motion?
Yes.
So under the condition that there is designated parking for the two southern buildings in that agreement with 2690 Crooks Road, along that blue squared lot there. Resolved that special use approval and preliminary site plan approval for the proposed 911 and 999 West Michigan Road mixed-use development, southeast corner of Big Beaver and Crooks, PIN 88-20-28-101-032-034 and -047, Section 28, currently zoned BB Big Beaver District, be granted, subject to the following conditions. Update the table of land use and zoning calculations provided on Section C3 of the plan set. Address OHM's comments and concerns. Provide trash enclosure screening details that comply with Section 13-02. Provide a shared parking agreement to the satisfaction of the city attorney. That also includes the designation highlighted.
Before I ask for a second, I want to make sure, is that language correct in there?
Did I word it? Okay.
No, I mean, you read it correctly, Mr. Fox.
You read the typographical error correctly.
You read it correctly.
What did I do?
It's wrong.
Or what happened?
So, and I think, Ms. Barakis, that's where you were stumbling on.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be proposed 911 and 999 West Big Beaver. It should be the 2690 Crooks Road address.
Oh, okay. Well, do I need to remake the whole motion with the correct address?
I think if you could just correct it and say the
I would like
address
to correct it
as
to
corrected
be-
by the Assistant City Attorney, yes.
As corrected by the Assistant City Attorney.
All right. Is there a second to the motion? Second it. Mr. Krent seconds it. Any discussion? Mr.
I
Faison.
have a question. So when we're designating that, we're saying nobody else can park there except Lindsay Center.
I think that's
residents.
the motion, yes.
Right.
I believe so. Any further discussion? Mr. Tagle.
I think we need to identify how many spots we're talking about. And I guess I'd almost want to look to the consultants to guide us on their opinion as to what is reasonable. I'm not trying to overburden the problem here, but I also want to have some level of assurity that if those spots are needed for the Lindsay Center parking, that there's some available for them. So I guess I'm not sure. I don't even know how many spots are over there.
You said 55.
Well, we're 51 deficient.
Okay, 51 deficient.
But I don't know how many spots are in that blue
yes.
rectangle.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Can we have somebody from OHM give us some clarification, and we'll include that in the motion and the second as well.
All right, if my notes are correct, the 2690 site for 144 units has 196 spaces on that site. The 85th percentile, so the anticipated peak parking demand, would be 172 spaces. However, under the ordinance requirement, 247 spaces would be required. So for shared parking, we would want them to meet the ordinance requirement to get up to that 247 number.
Is that the 51 that someone mentioned?
Yes.
I don't do the math in my head, but
Yes, 51 spaces.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you can do this. What's the difference between what the ordinance says they're 51 deficient? What are they saying with the 85 percentile? What's the deficiency, or is there any?
They're saying that the 85th percentile, so their anticipated peak parking demand is 172. So that is, they would still have parking on their
They'd
site
still have
without needing it.
Okay, I see. Okay. An opinion as to what?
I would suggest that the shared parking resolution provide enough to meet ordinance requirements, so that 51 spaces.
Okay.
Is it okay for the maker of the motion and the seconder?
Yes, it's fine with me.
Okay. Any further discussion, Mr. Cagle?
I just want to make sure, how many spots are in the blue box?
I think the language would be replaced with being specifically the blue box, and it would just be the 51 heading the southern portion.
Well, I want to make sure there's 51 there. If there's
I don't think there are.
55, 51's great. If there's not, I'm good with whatever's there. I mean,
Mr. Savinon said that's pretty close, I think.
Pretty close. Without, just, I'm squinting, but it's in the neighborhood.
If you want to assign a specific like designator, I get because you're looking to achieve a specific, something that can be referenced later.
if we don't, I mean, yeah, we gave you 3. You know, I mean, we have to have some specificity here.
I would say
While they're counting, Mr. Krent, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to say that at this point, if the northern one is not developed, it's just an agreement anywhere in that vast sea of asphalt. It doesn't have to be in the blue box.
yeah. So numbers. What do we count?
It's irrelevant if it's in the blue box or not.
It's a little low, but 50,
It's
they got to put them somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I'm good with that. I'm not, it doesn't, in my opinion, 51 it's not a magic number, but if we're at whatever's in the blue box, if it's 48, I mean, leave it up to you guys to count them when they.
If it's 48, I'll take that as the maker.
It was.
Good, I could second that. Go ahead.
Right.
48 for the public record.
Within
Any-
the motion.
Within the motion, yeah.
Any further discussion? Yeah, Ms. Parakis.
I have a question, maybe it's for Ms. Dufresne, but so how does this work? So if this passes and we have a shared parking agreement and we don't approve the northern parcel and then they sell it to someone else or something, that strip of parking is going to continue to belong to the Lindsay Center property? They can't touch it?
Well, it's not going to be belong, but their parking will have to be set aside for the Lindsay Center. I mean,
So if it gets sold, the new owners have to protect the Lindsay Center parking strip?
right, it's a shared parking agreement. Typically, they get recorded, so
Okay.
it's a burden that's, property owners would be aware of.
It's kind of like an easement or something, I think.
Any further discussion? Even though during the question period, I had asked the petitioner whether they were willing to develop one part without the other, and the response was no. I still think that based upon the resolution and based upon what we've discussed, they met the requirements that we asked them to meet at our last meeting, so I'll be voting yes on this. And I do have some concerns about the other project, but we're just dealing with this motion right now. So if there was no further discussion, I guess we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
No.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, now we are on to special use approval and preliminary site plan file number SU JPLN 2022-0004, proposed 911 and 999 West Big Beaver mixed-use development, southeast corner of Big Beaver and Crooks, pin 88-20-28-101-032-034 and -047, section 28, currently zoned BB Big Beaver District. Is somebody like to make a motion on this one, or any questions? Yes, Mr. Fox.
I would like to, I think I would like to make a motion. I just want to, so I would like to make a motion for approval, but I would want to stipulate specifics in terms of that U-shaped building, in terms of what we grant in terms of the first floor being special use for residential. So I'm not sure how I would word that and what page that's on, so that I can read it.
76.
So,
Mr. Sabato?
so just if it'll help you, the Planning Commission does not have the authority to grant special use approval for the elevation facing Crooks.
Yes.
It's not permitted, so.
Okay. So the other elevation, just in the interest, the other wall that I'm thinking in the interest of drawing people in is the northern facing wall. Because I have been around Grosse Pointe, I have been around a couple different communities. Having business abetting a parking structure is not a bad thing. It's people will just park in the structure and they will walk to the business. So that is the wall that I'm specifically thinking of not granting the special use so that more commercial could go into that building. But that is just me. So for the purposes of me making a motion, that's what I want to stipulate, if that makes sense, if that question is covering everything.
Yeah, page 76.
Thank you very much. So, I would like to make a motion. Resolved, the Planning Commission hereby approves the shared parking between 911 and 999 West Big Beaver Road and 2690 Crooks Road. And resolved that special use approval and preliminary site plan approval proposed 911 and 999 West Big Beaver mixed use development, southeast corner of Big Beaver and Crooks, pin 88-20-28-101-032-034 and -047, section 28, currently zoned BB, Big Beaver District, B, granted, subject to the following conditions. Review and revise the site plan based on OHM's comments. For building E, replace use of first floor residential along the eastern elevation and the northern elevation. Is that covered? Okay. Provide transparency. I'm specifically referencing the northern one. Provide transparency calculations on the elevation set and provide a shared parking agreement to the satisfaction of the city attorney.
Okay.
Somebody yell at me if I made a mistake.
Is there a second to the motion? For discussion purposes, I'll second it. Doesn't mean I'll vote for it, but any discussion. Mr. Krent.
I just wanted some clarification from Mr. Fox about the northern. You want it non-residential because?
Because again, I feel like having more commercial that pulls people in, kind of referencing comments that were made about trying to create a destination that people are traveling to instead of just an area. Western elevation. I think that by having potentially restaurants or some other kind of commercial there, it gives more people a reason to come in.
Okay.
So, and that seems to be the one building we can do that with.
Similar to what's at the 888 complex, where they have parking structure. Below the parking structure is restaurants and retail.
Oh, I am not referring to the parking structure.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I'm referring to the U-shaped building.
The residential
okay.
Yes,
I'm
the
sorry.
residential building that is the U-shaped.
Where's the picture here again?
For clarification,
Yes.
we're gonna go to the first floor plan of that building. That northern portion, most of it is underground parking.
Oh.
Surface parking, but covered
Below
surface parking.
Well.
So does it meet the requirements?
That,
You said it didn't.
Yeah, they're asking for a special use,
Parking is
but if it's
inboard.
currently not residential, do they
Underground
need that
covered
special
parking.
use?
let's get to the first, let's get to the,
For sure.
Oh.
For clarification purposes, I was going off of earlier comments referencing that north wall needed the special use because the intention was that it would be residential. If it's not residential and it's gonna be parking, then I would likely want to amend the motion that I made based off of that.
Okay, why don't you amend it?
Is it parking, I guess is what I'm.
It is.
It is parking. So then I would amend the motion just to strike that related to the northern
Hold on,
wall,
let's
and
get
I
there
would
and
likely adjust it to,
just get,
I apologize for the confusion for the note takers.
so here it is. So this unit would require special use because it's first floor residential. This unit would require special use as first floor residential. This underground parking complies with the zoning, not underground, first floor covered parking complies with the zoning ordinance. So to your point, Mr. Fox, if you said the northern portion can't be residential, basically they lose these 2 units. But again, let me stress, the units on this can't be resident, they can't be residential, these have to be converted to some other use.
Where you're pointing is west, right?
This is Crooks.
Yeah.
This is the parking deck.
So which one of those units could not be there?
This one, these 6 cannot be residential.
6.
But if Mr. Fox's motion goes that the northern part can't be residential, is what I heard, right?
Well, that we wouldn't grant the special use to allow it to be.
You're right. Then this one as well would have to be eliminated as well, because that
All right.
fronts.
Then I apologize for the confusion. Admittedly, I'm going to strike the whole reference to the northern wall and just go through with the motion as written. Because I see no use in just adjusting one unit. So I apologize for the confusion on that part. So that is my motion is as written.
So I think this is the first. I've worked here for 20 and a half years, and I have made typographical errors on resolutions before. This is the first meeting where I've made a typographical error on 2 resolutions. Instead of eastern elevation, it should have said western elevation. Yep. So again, Mr. Fox, you nailed the reading of my typographical error. My mistake, I apologize. It should say western elevation, not eastern.
May I just accept that as an reading it all through? Okay, thank you. Apologies for any confusion that created.
Oh, that was my fault.
All right.
So does this, cool. Thank you.
Poor Kathy.
We're ready?
Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
There's a raise after tonight, so.
Mr. Lambert?
Oh, wait, I wanted to make sure that any discussion. None. Okay. Now
Mr.
we're ready.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
No.
Ms. Malala Holly?
No.
Ms. Parakis?
No.
Mr. Tagle?
No.
Mr. Biegner?
No.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
4 yeses, 5 noes.
The motion to approve is defeated then. And let me ask our city staff, is it appropriate to either, are we done with this, or do we need a resolution to essentially deny the action? Mr. Carlisle is shaking his head no. No. Okay, so unless somebody wants to float another resolution.
There could be a revised resolution, certainly, but there's no reason to make there's no reason to do a resolution again if there's no desire of the Planning Commission.
Okay, unless somebody else wants to float a resolution, we are on this item for this evening. Hearing no one speaking up, then we're on to other items, public comment for items on the agenda. Is there anyone who wants to speak to the commission for an item on the agenda? Mr. Jonah.
Yes, hello.
Welcome back.
Yes, thank you very much for having me tonight, of course. This is a very complex project, and we are doing our best to phase this. This is a multi-year step process, and we do want to get going on it. It's phases that it will not go out all at once. It's physically impossible. There is a phasing plan that was submitted to the city also. I understand that there is some work to be done on the U-shaped building, as per se, and also the parking structure with the community center on where it's placed, the units on the first floor, and I will go back and look at it. I do want to keep this project going. It is a big commitment from us, all the parties to be. Is there a way we could look at this in phases right now and say, let's table the back portion of it. Let's revisit it and see what we can do and how we can do it, and I will give it another go at it. And if it doesn't come to be, it just doesn't come to be, and we understand that, and it is what it is. Is there a way we could look at the front portion so we could get 2 new developments going in Troy, in the Big Beaver right now, and move forward with these 2, revise the back portion, and go from there? If that's open discussion, I'm happy to look at phasing this property. It is a large property. It can't go all at once anyways. We need to be able to park cars. There is a phasing plan.
I think the commission would be open to seeing what you might come back with. So I can't speak for everyone here, but I would assume that we're open to seeing what you might come back with.
Most likely it is just going to be table the back end of it, and it's going to be a much longer discussion, and something that if we can't do it, we just simply leave it as a parking lot in the back. Personally, I don't think it's right for all the parties to be, including the city of Troy, and we'll go from there. But if we can look at this in phases, is there any way that we can have comments on that tonight, Ben?
I'll defer to the commission whether they want to talk about that tonight. I will tell you, we reviewed the project in totality, so we looked at all the uses at 911. We didn't, or 911 and 999. We didn't look at the residential or the retail only versus the residential portion. So we looked at it as a whole. So I couldn't comment. We could not comment on a staff standpoint regarding those retail uses alone, standalone tonight. Certainly, if the Planning Commission wants to have a discussion, I'm going to leave that up to the chairman. But we could not make a recommendation tonight that to just do those retail or not. We'd have to think about it based on a revised plan, taking off the portions that are not part of the consideration tonight.
And my concern is that it will just stay a vacant parking lot, and if we can't come to agreement, it is what it is, and we table it until a further discussion, maybe a long time from now. It may be my kid's coming up here and presenting something with the parking lot. It is a long-term commitment project there that we don't have all the control over. And I'm sorry to say that we can't go, we've tried, we can't do it in some aspects of it. And we still want to beautify this corner. We don't like empty office buildings. It's been sitting vacant there for over 3 years now. That one of the office buildings, not the main headquarter building. And I would like to see something happen with the project. It's a shame that it does sit vacant. The office is tough today. We are trying to reutilize it and redevelop this project. And it does take commitment on both sides. And if I could just go back and address the parking, it was not excuse me if it didn't come off correct, and I'm happy designating those parking spaces. I just wanted to make it best for both properties, for everyone to use if needed. If it does sit vacant for so long that the parking is not utilized, we would like to come back and say, look, this doesn't work this way. If we could park more cars here that are here or there, and it's a work in progress. It's a very large site with over 1,200 parking spaces. 50 parking spaces in our mind is very justifiable on where they can and can park. And we just want to have an open discussion. It's not necessarily a hardline no from us at all. It's what's best for the property. And that's how we look at it. It's not per se that we will not do that. Of course not. We want to make sure this works. And that's how we look at projects. There's a give and take on all sides to make something like this work. And it's our commitment to the city of Troy to do that. So,
I think Mr. Carl and Mr. Savin have a pretty good idea of how the commission feels about this project, and I think if you come back to them with some ideas, they can probably tell you that's a no-go or that's a possibility. You still, out of the 9 members, you still got 4 votes, so you're probably not that far away, so some tweaking should probably help.
It will come back with probably in phases now with the retail, and there's a lot more planning there. It's going to take a lot more discussion, a lot more time, and may never come to fruition at this point. But I do want to speak openly with you, and we are giving our best effort. We have looked at different phases, and if it comes back with a certain phase and a future phase, it is. We understand if it's not what the city likes and it sits there vacant, it is what it is. And we go from, not vacant, as a parking lot. It is all we can put forward. We're putting our best foot forward here, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to address us for items on the agenda? If not, then we'll come back for Planning Commission comment. I'll go over to Ms. Zarnecki and start that way and work our way around.
I have none. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Fox?
Well, I've noticed we've had a number of parking conversations. I'm just, for lack of me being on this board for very long, when was the last time the city did look at the parking requirements? Is that something that was recent or?
Go ahead, Mr. Savin.
Probably 15 years, since we overhauled the ordinance in 2011, so 12 years.
Okay. Maybe that's something we want to look into, but I'll save that discussion for another night.
So just, can I? Sure. So we do allow land banking, we do allow reductions, we allow shared parking, there's a lot of flexibility there. I'm hearing from the development community that 2 per unit is a little high. We do allow for 1 space per studio, so there's a little flexibility there. So we certainly, it may be the best time to look at it, given the fact that we've got vacant office buildings where that's being converted, and we've got some challenges. So your point is well taken.
Mr. Beekner.
All set.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
Yeah.
Mr. Hudson.
No comment.
Mr. Faison.
Agree with Mr. Fox and Brent. Thanks for your comment. I actually saw an article in the paper a couple of days ago talking about just this issue and talking about 2 spots for an apartment and 1 spot for every 300 feet of an office building, which are our requirements, and how many cities are reducing those or even eliminating them. And, you know, we've also heard from developers similar, like 2 spots is too much. So again, I'm repeating what's been said, but I think looking at it and being a little bit more flexible might be beneficial.
Ms. Parakis.
So you slid something in there. Some are even eliminating parking requirements. Some cities are eliminating off-street parking requirements.
Ann Arbor's one of them. Yeah, Ann Arbor, I thought also Royal Oak, I'm not sure, but
It's a very aggressive approach, but it's basically saying basically the feeling is that the developers know what they need. They realize that if, like, for example, if it's an apartment building and there's not enough parking on site and they park off site to get a ticket, they're going to come knocking on the landlord's door saying, you got to pay my ticket. So they're not going to build a development that doesn't park. It's a little bit of a leap of trust there, in my opinion, but that's kind of a trend we're seeing throughout North America right now.
Thank you. Ms. Parakis.
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. Mr.
just
Krant.
my little input on that parking. When we attended the Michigan Association of Planners back maybe 5-6 years ago, there was a presentation about parking, and one of the interesting stories was about a city that was proposing a bond issue, a 30-year bond issue for a parking structure for their city. And after due diligence, they found out because of autonomous vehicles and ride share, other businesses like Lyft and Uber and all that, that what they were thinking they would need was really half of what they would need, and actually in 30 years, it was down to 25% of what they thought they needed. So they stopped the whole process because they'd be paying for over 30 years for a parking structure that was very underutilized. So it may be that we should look at the future 30 years from now when we start requiring these parking things. One other quick thought is I just wanted the petitioner of can I comment on the last thing that we just defeated? Is that legal, or do we have to avoid conversation on? Do I have to avoid talking about what we just defeated, or can I talk about that proposal we defeated?
Talking about what we talked about tonight?
Yes, tonight.
I prefer that you didn't. However, the petitioner is still here, so I'm not as wary of.
Okay, well, I won't get into a lot of specifics.
If they leave,
Yeah.
obviously we don't want to talk about it.
Right.
It's still here.
Okay, well,
I'm fine talking about everything. I
just wanted to say that I agree with Ms. Parakis and Mr. Tagle about making that area more vibrant for the community. Look at what's on the other corners as far as their community engagement. You know, you've got on the north side of Big Beaver, on the west side, you've got a street of restaurants and other retail elements. On the east side, on the north side, there's another strip mall with and 2 large restaurants, but again, a more vibrant area. And across the street from you on the west side of Crooks, you've got Kirby's restaurant and there's another restaurant there, I can't remember the name of it right now. So to say that, you know, a restaurant on Crooks wouldn't survive, we got lots of examples up and down. They're well attended. So if you can incorporate something more vibrant in that on Crooks, I would be pleased.
We'll do the best we can.
Sure, I know you will.
Kirby's is a bad example. I believe they're closed, but.
Oh, sorry. I haven't been there in a while.
But we'll do the best we can, and we're going to look at this at phasing it and go from there. It's going to be a lot larger discussion with the back portion of the property, and we're going to do our best that we can. Sure. And as a developer, I kindly politely request, ask that the city does look at their parking ordinance. We do work in a lot of cities. We have seen a lot of parking ordinances, and in our professional opinion, it is very high. It does stop development. You want to bring the most that you can work with the city, with the property. And I respectfully ask that there do be a parking study on this, and I think you would find out. Thank you.
Mr. Tagle.
Nothing tonight.
Ms. Dufresne.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Severin.
Last night at City Council, Long Lake and Crooks Plan Unit Development was approved 7-0, and the zoning ordinance text amendment 257 related to places of worship was approved 7-0.
Thank you. Mr. Carlisle.
I'm just shocked because I don't think Brent ever makes mistakes.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
It's a
Our flawless Brent, yes.
I just wanted to mention two things. I know sustainability has come up several times. Last night at City Council, there was a prolonged discussion. I believe they're planning a study session sometime in the summer to talk about it, and maybe they would invite us to come and participate in some way. Mr. Severin?
I had staff meeting this morning, and I reminded the city manager that the Planning Commission reminded him that I'd already told him that the Planning Commission had mentioned there seems to be a bit of a groundswell regarding sustainability. But please understand it's budget season right now, and once we get through that, I think that'll open up the opportunities for joint meetings and things like that.
Mr. Tagle.
I'm just curious, who's going to create this study session? And I mean, what's the focus? Sustainability is a big topic.
Well, that's true. So there has to be some. It's not. There hasn't been an agenda set yet. There's going to have to be dialogue. We're going to have to zero in on. City management and city council are going to have to come up with a scope that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, if there's no other comments, then we are adjourned. Okay.